We're going to switch our conversation now, and we do have a guest joining us. Still talking about young people, actually. I know the British Council has a next generation program which they're working on, and I think Ojoma Ochai is online. Ojoma, if you can hear me, how are you doing?
Hi, how you doing? I
Very well,
can hear
thank
you.
you. Okay, very well, thanks. What's this report about, the next generation report, and what is it trying to achieve?
So, Next Generation is a report series that the British Council has done all over the world since 2009. And what Next Generation seeks to do is really to examine the conditions that support young people to live more creative, more fulfilled, more active lives as citizens in the countries in which they are. And so we conduct the research in countries that the UK considers strategically important. Um, and in the research, we seek to understand a number of things. So in the countries where we're doing it, we want to understand what matters to young people in that country in terms of their values, in terms of their aspirations. We want to understand how much of a voice do young people in that country have, and to what extent do they feel like they can shape what happens in their countries and communities. Next Generation also seeks to understand what vision young people have for their communities and their country. And finally, it looks to understand what policies young people think that the country or community needs to develop to ensure that young people have a voice and are able to use that voice to shape their own future. And so that's really what Next Generation was seeking to do in a Nigerian context. And that's what it is. So it's first and foremost that research process that allows us amplify all of those things I've talked about in the context of what young people want.
Yeah, so I get a sense from you now that this is not a Nigeria-specific research. Correct me if I'm wrong, if it's happened other places. But with Nigeria specifically, um, because we have a very young demographic here. The youth is way, I think some people say 70% sometimes of the population, which is a huge chunk of, of our demographic. How does this report help? We see so many statistics these days with unemployment, with just creativity generally. It's not very exciting for a lot of Nigerians. What does this research do, if anything at all, with that space?
So I think it does do a lot. This is the second time we're doing this research in Nigeria. The first time we did the Next Generation research in Nigeria was in 2010. And if you've heard this phrase that we often talk about, youth, not oil, is the future of Nigeria. That phrase came from the very first Next Generation report that we did. And so for us, it's about giving voice to things that maybe we already know, but labeling them and putting words to them and then giving them visibility as a result. And I think something else that Next Generation does is to articulate the complexity and the sort of multifaceted nature of the conditions that young people are living in. So in a Nigerian context, 10 years after the first Next Generation, what we really wanted to understand was the country has gone through a period of rapid change, whether that's culturally, economically, politically, and it was the 60th independence anniversary last year. And so we were wanting to take that moment to reflect on, right, 60 years after independence, what are young people thinking and feeling, and how can we give voice to that to support the platforming and amplification? And the idea is that by supporting that amplification and advocating for young people with the stakeholders that they sort of address through what they say, those aspirations, those thoughts and those feelings that young people have are taken into account in policymaking in the country.
Yeah. So is this report, is it a public, is it something that we can access, and how do we access it if it is?
It is public. People can see it on our website. Our website is www.britishcouncil.org.ng. And so people can go there and it's on the front page, but it is publicly accessible.
Yeah. What was the most interesting thing that jumped out at you while doing this research or reading the research or putting it together about the young Nigerian?
So there was a lot of validation of what we already knew, like young Nigerians in terms of their aspirations, they're innovative, they're independent, they're positive, and they're hopeful. But I think something that really stood out for me was when we asked young Nigerians across the country what was most important to them, 98% said their families, which, it's surprising in the sense that I'd have thought that people would have talked about jobs, even though it ranked high. It was only third. So family was first, religion was second, and work and economic activities were third, with about 85% saying those were the most important things. But also something we found really interesting as well was that leisure was also a top priority for young people in Nigeria. Another surprising thing for me was that only 39% of young people think that the top priority of the country for the next 5 years should be prioritizing economic growth, which, considering the trends in the last few years, I think we went in thinking it would be slightly higher than it ended up being. And then I suppose the final thing to say is, in terms of the top value for young people, they identified security. And for them, security was the top thing that they wanted to achieve for themselves and for their families. So that was also an interesting piece of insights that came from the research.
That's very interesting. I mean, family topping is, I'm also slightly surprised. I mean, it's a good thing. It just wasn't what I expected, I think, based on what you're saying. But thank you very much. Just quickly before we go now, give us the website again so we know where to go to.
So the website is www.britishcouncil.org.ng. And when people get on the site, they'll just see the report.
Okay. And your social media handles, because that's usually easier now for this generation to access you first.
That is true. On Twitter, you can find us on Twitter at NG British. So N for Nigeria, NG British on Twitter or Instagram.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ojoma Ochai. Looking forward to perusing this report, and thanks for all the good things you do.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right, that's our show. Thank you very much for joining us. Like I always say, you can follow the conversation on Twitter at RobinMinds now is the handle. Please use the hashtag RobinMinds when you tweet at us. Do you have a good week? I'll see you next Sunday.